quorum now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why don't we go ahead and get started? It's 7:02 and I'm calling this meeting to order. First off, presumably you all saw the note that Karen cannot make it tonight. Hopefully she's feeling better. Hanny stepped up to volunteer to take some notes. So thank you very much, Hanny.
Okay.
Appreciate that. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. I don't know if we can do that without Karen here, but maybe. Let me just ask, does anyone have any feedback that they have not already provided to Karen?
There's one thing I was thinking, the letter of support that you wrote for Deborah Stark should be in the minutes as an appendix.
Okay. Well,
Okay, that makes sense.
But
So,
everything else was, I didn't see any problems at all.
okay, so I think we then are in a position to approve the minutes.
There was one.
I'm sorry, Brad.
minor typo, just one typo of Amanda's last name was spelled right in the minutes, but it was spelled with a C right at the top. I noticed that was just a spelling error. I don't think it invalidates it.
Where do you see that? I'm looking at the top there.
If I looked at the right copy,
The one attached to the email.
What?
The one that was
Okay.
attached to the email
Which email?
that Jerry sent.
No,
Okay, maybe I looked at the wrong one.
no, it's
Okay,
it's the one on the drive.
Yeah,
And-
COHN. Is that COHN or not?
So it's the first paragraph says who was present at the meeting. That's where it's misspelled.
Oh,
yeah, okay, but
And
otherwise, that the
maybe
minutes.
there's somewhere else as well.
oh yeah, that's right. Okay, I'll make note of it. Okay.
Okay. So then, would someone like to make a motion approving the minutes, considering those two changes, namely the correction to Amanda's name and the
Yeah.
inclusion of the letter to Deborah, the Deborah Stark letter?
So-
Sure. I'll second it or something.
I think someone needs to state the motion.
You have to speak this much. The motion to approve the minutes of the meeting on October 27th, 2021.
With those changes, right?
No, with the amendment, yeah, sorry, with the
I'll
change,
second it.
with the changes discussed. at the-
Okay. So we have a motion on the table with a second to approve the minutes with the correction to Amanda's name and with the inclusion of the Deborah Stark letter.
Sure.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Sure.
Sure.
Are there any negative votes? Okay, it passes unanimously. That was easy. Thank you.
Karen, you had something to say. I don't know what it was.
Well, I just wasn't, I mean, I had sent some things to Karen earlier. I just wasn't, so it's, I mean, they're not terribly important, but I just didn't know if they had been addressed or not, is all.
What's that?
I had sent some comments to Karen earlier, yesterday, I think, not a long time ago. And I'm just not sure whether they
Right.
are included in that as amended or not. But you asked if anybody had anything they hadn't already given Karen, which kind of, from which I inferred that if we had already given it to Karen, it's already incorporated.
That was indeed my intent.
Okay.
Although strictly speaking, I realize now better process would be to make sure that everyone saw the edits that you submitted. So unless anyone objects, I suggest we move forward, and I'll try and do better next time.
Sure.
Okay. Want to give you you all a brief update on things I'm aware of. Not too much to report here, except that I attended the CMLP meeting, board meeting this morning, which was very interesting. Kind of the big topic today that took up the vast majority of the time was the rate increases that are being planned. There will be cost increases in 2022. Even noting that our costs this year were 10% higher than last year. Without the cost increases, CMLP would run a $4 million loss on the year. So there's a need for the increases, and basically there will be two different increases. One is a 4% rate increase, kind of across the board, with no expiration. In other words, think of it this way: the rates are just going up, period, by 4%. In addition to that, there will be a PCA, a power cost adjustment, which is a temporary increase. And this will be substantial. This will be around 14%. There were two proposals. I'm forgetting exactly which one was approved. One proposal was to spread that rate increase across the year. The other proposal was to increase utilize the PCA only during the period during which we have excessive energy costs, which typically is the winter. I believe unfortunately my notes aren't good enough here, but I believe the decision was to spread it out over a year. So these are material increases in costs that will be passed along to ratepayers. So
Gary, what was the first one? You said there's a PCA. The first one was a 4% increase or 10%?
yeah, 4% rate increase permanent.
Okay.
So
Second one's PCA.
When you say across the board, does that mean, the meter fee, the transmission fee, and all those fees?
No, it's just the energy fee.
It's just the energy fee, okay.
Yeah.
I heard that it was explained to me that the material increase was due to the cost of natural gas increases.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
also,
largely. I want to go ahead. Someone else wanted to speak.
no, that the amount it would come to the end user was approximately about a dime more per kilowatt hour.
Why don't you let Jerry say what it is? So I don't think
Yeah,
he
I
said it.
have notes on that. What I do have is on the PCA that it would be an increase of 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And I'm forgetting exactly what the kilowatt hour price is right now. We pay, I know
16.5 cents.
it could be, I tend to think of the rates inclusive of transmission and distribution. And I know that's around 18 cents. I'm not sure what it is if you pull those out. It may be, yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate.
Yeah,
But
I think Brad's right,
what's
it's
that?
16%.
Sorry?
It's about 16 cents, maybe 16 point something.
Depends which tier you're on, of course, but
Yeah.
maybe an average.
But I did want to relate some information about the cost increases, because this is worldwide, or I should say it's occurring worldwide. It is not just limited to Concord.
Yeah.
So I read a great article in The Economist last month that explained all this in terms of what's happening. And I think it's interesting to understand the dynamics here. in part because we may get asked about this, in part because sustainability is in the middle of this, and in part because it's an opportunity for us to explain to people that the higher these energy costs go, the more interesting wind and solar power look. But at any rate, there were three fundamental issues that the economists identified. One, first in their list, was that there's been inadequate investment in renewables. By their calculation, they figure that current investments in terms of renewables is only at about half the level it needs to be to globally reach net zero by 2050. So that's a substantial underinvestment. The second issue they identified is the geopolitics. And you don't need to look too much further than Russia and what's going on in Europe to have a sense of that. It's not pretty. And that's given a lot of markets the jitters. And the third thing they identified, that they refer to it as flimsy safety buffers in the power markets. And by that, I understand that to mean that energy supplies are low. And according to them, it's across the board. Oil supplies, gas supplies, even coal supplies in India, for example, appear to be well below the amounts that would allow markets to function without tremendous volatility. They also pointed out, which I know also from other news sources, hydropower is tremendously reduced. Lake Powell and Lake Mead are very, very low in the West. And I don't know if they've begun to curtail power generation, but I think they're close if they haven't. And apparently Brazil, at least, I'm sorry, at different places in Latin America, they're experiencing these issues as well with hydropower. Brad?
Was this all at the CMLP meeting?
No, this last part is my own commentary.
Right. So I think this is really interesting, but I don't know if it's relevant to Concord.
It may not be directly, but I find it helpful personally to understand these backdrops for those occasions when I get into discussions with friends and colleagues about what's going on and they start to blame renewables. It's not about renewables, except that there's underinvestment there.
Right. And that's true here in this town.
Yeah.
We need to keep pushing that.
The only other thing I have to report is that Amanda has set up a meeting for myself, Jake Swenson, and Amanda to meet with Dave Wood to get the latest on the PV project at the middle school. So that has not happened. That's, I think, the 29th, Amanda, does that sound right? So I don't have anything new to report there, but hopefully after that meeting I will. So that's it for my comments. Amanda? You're on the agenda if you have any updates you'd like to share with us about drinking from a fire hose.
I was just trying to quickly check that meeting date, and it does look like it is the 29th. So at that meeting, I'm also hoping that we can talk a little bit about metrics. I know that's been of interest, of what data is available, how often could it be available, how accurate is it. I've pulled together a table that lists all of the metrics that are on the dashboard, all the metrics that Kate had been putting into the annual report, some brainstorm ideas on other metrics that I've heard folks talk about or just that I've seen in the industry. And I'm hoping also at that meeting, we might be able to get further develop that metric list and ideas and talk about the availability of data as well, especially as it comes from CMLP. I think Kate Hodges is also going to join that meeting from the town's leadership side. And that's why we pushed it to the 29th, because she's on vacation and then Thanksgiving and all of that good stuff. So that's in the works. I'll also say that I met with DPW this week and talked to them again about the GAP 3 financing. Their water and superintendent is in his second week, and so he's also coming up to speed. But had talked to them about continuing to take a look at that application when it comes out and see what we can do. If it, depending upon what it is, Dave Wood also need to be involved in that application, like if it was a solar energy project. So I don't have a lot of updates on that, but in the email chain, there was a point about the sludge being sent to an incinerator, and it goes to the Greater Lawrence Sewage District. I may have gotten that name wrong, but they were the recipient of a GAP 2 energy grant to reduce their energy consumption. So if that's of interest to people, I just met with them, so I haven't dug into that fully to know the impact of that. But I'd like to dig into that more, and perhaps I can report back out to this group on sort of where that's going in Lawrence and what's happening when it gets there. So that's one thing. I'll also say that the fleet electrification study has moved on to phase 2. All of the data has been collected and is moving, has been put into a data management system, and they'll go on now to assessment. So that's in the works. I've also been meeting with facilities and DPW on setting up a potential pilot project for community food compost drop-offs. I think we're near a solution on that and hoping to roll out a program maybe in January, February time. So that's also in the works. And on the school building committee, I've been attending. Okay.
Question on the compost program. How does that interact or play with the commercial services that provide compost pickup here in town?
Yeah, according to my research, there are several vendors that provide that third-party service. And some of them provide data and some of them don't. And so one of them I know has over 300 households participating in it. This won't impact their account at all unless they were hoping to use the municipal drop-off site, which they could. So the idea is based off of many towns in Massachusetts actually already have this type of program. Lexington has one, and Boston has two that I was kind of looking as a model. And you have compost bins that look like garbage cans with signage that make it really clear that it's a compost bin. And both Lexington and Boston, they actually lock their bins. And so in order to get access to them, you take a quick survey online, or maybe we'll put the combination on the bin, but you have to kind of read through what you can put in it in order to open it. And that's to help with compliance so that what's in there actually gets composted. And then it would be open to any residents wanting to bring their food waste to those drop-off locations. And so we'll likely start semi-small and see what kind of traction we get, because I think a lot of people who would like to compost likely have that curbside service. So I think we'll need to see what kind of traction we get to know what kind of scale that we should be. But I think in the future, curbside pickup of food compost is still on the table. This is just something that could serve as an interim solution to provide that service until that town-wide opt-in curbside is available.
So there would be multiple drop-off points.
Yeah, so I'm aiming to have 2 drop-off sites, and it may get scaled back to 1 in the short term. Again, just trying to think through all the logistics. There's some concerns around dumping at these facilities and if they're unmonitored and who will monitor them and things like that. So we're still working through logistics, and again, might be able to start small and scale up from there as needed.
Sharon, you have a question or you raised your hand? Yeah.
Minor comment, I believe it's called the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District for the minutes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Janet? You have your hand raised?
I just wanted to say that that new compost system would probably be very helpful to people that live in apartments and when they, their own curbside collection probably would not be possible.
Yeah, and we also don't currently have food compost for the municipal buildings. So that's another aim that hopefully, say as Harvey Wheeler starts having meals again, and all of the employees who have lunch on the facilities would be able to then send their food waste into that stream instead.
Do we know if the schools, my children went to Willard and we had a little bit of a pilot program years ago, but I don't know what's happened in recent years.
Yeah, I need to check on that. I think all of the schools were composting, and so was town hall. And then when COVID happened and people weren't there, the service stopped. And I'm not sure if it's picked back up again. So I don't know the current status. I know that it was happening. I'm not sure if it's happening right now, but I'm hoping to meet with folks from the school soon to kind of hear more about operations and plans.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Amanda before we move on in the agenda? Brad, you've got something?
Just wanted to mention what we heard the other day from Deborah, which was that her coming to this meeting got her a lot of support last month, and she got a variance, and so her problem is solved. So we should feel good that we spent the time talking about it, and we can keep on thinking about it for more than a variance for one store, but that was some good progress.
Yeah, I'll add just on a personal note, this is kind of an embarrassing admission, but after her presentation and request, I began to be aware of just how much food comes in plastic. I'm not talking about these containers. It's just like everything is wrapped in plastic.
We should have a challenge.
that may be a topic or an action at some point. But at any rate, that just a kind of a personal comment on that. Yeah, I was happy with what we did. I know she's very pleased with our support. I think this was a positive thing all the way around.
I have a question. Maybe Amanda knows the answer. There is a company on Baker Ave called Trashology. Do we know anything about what they do?
I don't. I've noticed them.
I've noticed them multiple times because they actually opened up, I think, about, I want to say maybe 6 months ago at most. There used to be an abandoned warehouse there.
Right.
And I'm just curious about what they do. Obviously, they have something to do with trash, but no idea what else.
For some reason, I had the impression they have some mechanism for converting trash to energy, but that's just speculation on my part.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving forward. Brad, you're
Yeah.
on to give us an update on
Okay.
Concord.
So I have prepared just a little write-up. The community platform that the Cooler Concord is hosted on is done by the nonprofit that I work for most of the time. And it's used by a number of communities around Acton, Foxborough, Harvard, Lexington, and some others. And each of them customize it to their own location. So it's a custom platform, which is specifically designed for engaging residents to take sustainable action. And it's a work in progress. There's nothing perfect about it, but we're trying to make it as good as we can make it. And because I work on it, I have a personal interest, not a financial interest in any way, because we're funding the development of it. And so I could show you what the status, if you don't mind, really quickly, and talk you through it. And I think some people have seen it. So I'll go here and then so go to the home page. So this is it. Pictures of the pictures from the town, some customizable buttons that take you to various places, including an actions page, local resources, events, testimonials, some community goals, which I made up. They're motivational goals. They're something that number of households involved, and number of actions that people take, and number of metric tons of CO2 saved. And those metric tons of CO2 come from a carbon calculator that actually we made for the Cooler Concord Fair a few years ago. Now it's part of the back end of this website. And then there's also some featured events and campaigns at the bottom. Now, Jerry made the point, likely so, that those events are kind of hidden away and nobody's going to find them. And in fact, that's true, but they're also mostly in the past. It takes some management to keep these things up to date, and also we're working on ways of presenting new content to the users, either a first-time user as a tour, that's in progress right now, or sort of news that users are alerted when something changed. And if we're holding an event, you should know about it. But the main things are these actions. So these are actions you can take. We have 14 different actions, and they're different towns have different actions, slightly different. Ours are different because the incentives are different. It's a little different to do, let's say, solar here. But if you have a profile which allows us to sort of count what you do, you can let us know what you did or when you do something. And this website will count it up and tell you metric tons of CO2. You can also tell it that you wanted to do it in light bulbs or something like that. It's kind of a, for most people, metric tons of CO2 doesn't mean that much. So we're trying to make this engaging in a way and understandable. As I say, it's a work in progress. Nothing is perfect. A couple of the other things on the site are service providers. I've been building this out with a list of all the HVAC providers that CMLP has, or no, that Abode has. So this is a way of connecting people to help them contact people to help them do their work. All these pages you can filter by things like category or cost or stuff like that. There's also teams. So for example, here's a team. You can make a team yourself or join a team. Here's a team from First Parish in Concord, and we're going to be trying to use this in the church I go to try to motivate other parishioners. Like, let's see what we can do. Because this is about building community and learning from each other and feeling like you can make a difference, either in the small scale or in the community, or maybe ultimately in all of the communities. Now, this just gives you a taste of it. Events are, as I said, something you kind of have to keep up to date. And we're also trying to improve the functionality here where you could have an event and choose to make it, to say that you are interested in going, get reminders, stuff like that. And there's also testimonials, the idea of being that if you're part of the community, you'd like to see what your neighbors are doing and maybe find out whether they liked it, stuff like that. I just go back to this. So there's those are the content on the site. Those are entered in an admin, a separate admin site. It's designed to be really quite easy to use. You name things, you upload pictures, you put in some text. But most of the site is not like as complicated as WordPress where you have to design stuff. It's designed to be something that's really quite easy for like a couple admins to manage and promote. It's integrated with social media so that you can share stuff and you can be part of the Facebook or Instagram page as a way of bringing you back to the website. A website doesn't really do anything unless people go there, it turns out. And that's always the challenge.
Like a book, Brad. If you don't buy it, you can't read it.
That's exactly right. And that's obvious, especially in hindsight, when you see that people aren't going there. But we have, one of the things that we're doing with the nonprofit is we have some Google Analytics behind this. We know what fraction of people go there with a mobile device or a laptop and which pages they go. So we can learn something about what works, what doesn't work, and share that with all our communities. Yeah, we're trying to, we want, now I'm talking from the nonprofit point of view, we want all the communities to be successful and feel like they're making a difference and continue to use this and get better and share with each other. A big part of the nonprofit is the networking of communities, so that we see what Lexington does and maybe we can try some of that. That's one of the things I think is really most exciting about it.
Brad, do you have any external links driving people to it?
Well, so we have a newsletter, which we haven't been using much lately with the 800 people on the list.
I meant electronic external links.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning the way to attract people to a website is two ways. One is have something written up in a web page somewhere with a link that directs people to your website, right? That's one way. Another way is to encourage people going to it. And then with social media, they redirect, they basically resend your link, and you're basically creating inorganic traffic into your website, right?
And we're trying to do both of those.
Okay.
But so promotion.
So do you have like a link on the Concord home site, Concord page?
No. So Concord hasn't, as a town, hasn't embraced this.
Okay.
And that's one of the questions we can raise is this good site? Is it confusing? Does it help the town meet its goals? I'm not going to take a strong position on that just because I'm so involved. It certainly wants to be more and more effective. we know from analytics that some people come to the site and they leave without even interacting with anything. And I'm not saying for the Cooler Concord site, but for sites in general, that's called a bounce. And that's someone who follows a link and it's like, I don't know how it got here, but I'm not bothering to interact with it. And we're learning as we go. That's why we're putting this product tour. So when you come to it the first time, it says, welcome, let me show you a couple things. This is what this is about. This is about being, we have a Mass CEC intern doing some programming now to do that product tour, and she's doing a good job with that. And we're hoping to have that finished in another month and some.
I guess I have a question maybe for Amanda, also not to put her on the spot, but you were talking before about metrics, right?
Yeah.
How are these actions here on Cooler Concord translate into the metrics, or are they, is there a correlation between the metrics you're tracking and what is happening on Cooler Concord? And, or if not, should there be a link?
Yeah, I think, can I answer that? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
Brad, I think we kind of talked about this a little bit last week on thinking, this is not going to happen probably in this meeting, but thinking through sort of branding around all of our initiatives, and how do we connect the branding, and how do we connect the websites, and how do we streamline things. And I think this needs to be a part of that conversation, especially with, so we have the sustainableconcord.org dashboard. We do pay KLA for the service of that dashboard. And it lists out all the goals and the actions and the blueprints in an engaging way. And then it has the action side of it, which lists some of the metrics and then steps that people can take in order to help reach those goals. And so there are some places where there's maybe duplicative information, like the actions, but I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. We always want to be encouraging people to take action. But I think that would be kind of a question for me to figure out, is just making sure that Sustainable Concord, Cooler Concord, the town's website are all connected to each other.
Right.
But I bet you also see in your Google Analytics, like the further something is embedded in the website, the less people that get there.
Right.
And so if we've got too many layers to get to where people need to go, would be another thing I'd want to think about when we formulate a plan.
So I'd make a comment about metrics, and metrics on our site, on this site I showed you, are always going to be partial, because they're always going to be the people who chose to go there and said, I did this. Whereas the metrics behind our climate action plan have to be, they need to be accurate. They need to come from the electric company, and they need to come from, how many people installed stuff, really? And that's a difficult question to answer. But so the metrics, I almost think the metrics on our site are intended to be motivational as much as anything. Hey, this many people are doing stuff, so I could be part of that. And so it's almost kind of different. It's like a bottom up versus top down or something like that in some sense.
I think the granularity is very different.
Yeah.
On the Cooler Concord site, the granularity is an individual.
But you can aggregate it at the town level, right?
You could, certainly.
So many people put LED lights, and that translated into X.
Yeah, Well,
That's
hold
not
that
measured
thought.
elsewhere. I don't think that's measured elsewhere, unless you go and say, okay, I have so many people that did a mass save energy assessment and that translated into air source heat pump, but that's a much different dimension, right?
Yeah.
Right, right. But I think the explicit focus of the metrics on the Sustainable Concord is very much town-wide.
Yeah.
And so it kind of starts and ends there. And I don't mean that in any critical way. It's just, that's what that is. Whereas Cooler Concord starts with the individual, and yeah, it could be with some appropriate infrastructure, it could be scaled up to the entire town. That might make some sense in terms of linking it to societal goals, town goals. But I do think we need to be a little careful about how we position each of these goals. You know, Brad, you touched on that by saying that the Concord goals are intended to be motivational.
Isn't it true that some of the Cooler Concord information, which is about contractors and firms that do installations, can be more opinionated than what would be allowed on the town site? In a way, it's helpful because it gives people a way to really dig into what might work for them.
Yeah.
Whereas the town has to take an impartial stance, and they can't have the names and addresses of certain contractors listed unless it's very
Right.
carefully done.
And I actually don't believe in just picking your favorite contractor and putting it on the site. Some of the other communities say, yes, we partner with Boston Solar. You just heard an advertisement from the Wayland Group. They think that's a great company. And so they put that on their website. I am much more inclined to be very inclusive. It's not as helpful because a lot of people will come to this website and they say, well, you just told me a list of 15 contractors. Which one should I use? But I'm not that's kind of anti-competitive, and it's I would rather people be able to search based on ratings and what people are saying in testimonials and stuff. And I think that's fair, and I think that should be, that kind of level is something the town could be happy with if it's done right.
What would it take to get that agreement from the town in an official capacity?
An agreement with Mass Energize, is that what you're asking, Doug?
Yeah, where the town would be in a position to endorse the linking of the Cooler Concord website off of their page, rather than having to be so concerned about not being able to endorse sites that indirectly or directly endorse certain contractors.
I don't know the answer to that, but it's something I can put on my list of questions for my weekly check-in with Kate,
Right,
and see if I can get an answer.
right.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
most-
I don't know if it's important enough to warrant it, but it's just it brings the two sites closer together if there's agreement that that could happen from the town side. But isn't it the open meeting nature of the town one of the reasons that they're not really allowed to endorse directly?
No, it's conflict of interest law.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So I'd like to,
I mean, my view is that I think we've had that discussion now so many times, right? And we're sort of, it's a circular discussion, right? You have people, you want people to take action, and you want to be able to inform them what kind of action they can take, right? So one source is the website, the Town of Concord. The website of Town of Concord is basically, here are the programs we offer, period, right? And this is how you can participate in that, right? That's basically it. if I'm an individual, and so basically, if I'm not doing solar or air source heat pumps, tough luck, right? Basically, or in essence, right? And I think I know, being in town for 30 years, there are lots of people who are not going to spend $30 to $40,000 to put in a solar system, right? So what do we do with those folks? What do we encourage them to do? That's really what it boils down to in my mind. That's simple, right? It's very practical and simple.
So I think I want to, this is an interesting and important discussion. I think at some point we need to dig deep into some of these questions. But the agenda wasn't set up today to do
Right.
that.
Okay.
So I'd like to kind of table that discussion. I don't think we should forget about it. I think we do need to come back to it, but it's not for tonight.
Okay.
However, Cooler Concord and its status and plans plays an important role in the next topic. The main topic for tonight are these events and what I'm calling a sustainability series. And so what I'd like to do is kind of shift a little bit. We can still continue talking about Cooler Concord, but I'd like to focus now on what Cooler Concord can do and when it could do it to support these events we're planning. So Brad, you and Hanny and I talked about this a little bit. Well, let me take another step back. So I want to begin talking about our plans and our status and where we are with that. And Cooler Concord plays a role in terms of promotion, at least the way I've been thinking about it. And so this isn't quite the order I'd planned to discuss it tonight, but since we're talking about Cooler Concord, we'll put Cooler Concord first. I'm imagining that Cooler Concord would be where we would send people to find out about these events. Not that it would be the only place, but it would be a centralized place. And that we would have to get the word out about Cooler Concord, we'd have to promote Cooler Concord. But then once this is set up, if we do Cooler Concord right, I believe it could be self-sustaining in terms of generating traffic itself. So Brad, I'm curious, you know, do you have a schedule or in mind for enhancements?
No, we do. It's a little bit, you know, that what managing software engineers is like. This is mostly volunteer driven. But we are, you know, working to, well, we have a schedule of what we're going to be trying to do. So a lot of it involves being able to communicate outwards, like when you publish an event, and this is what I know you want to do. Let's say you want to do an event, it's in April, we want to have some publicity. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it in the newspaper, and we're going to put it in the Facebook group, and we'll want to reach out to everybody we know, nudge them to come and sign up, say. And there's various ways of doing that. You could use Eventbrite. You could use some other things. So some of the improvements we're trying to make on the website is just make it, you know, make that platform more useful in general, not just for this town, but for all of our towns to be able to more effectively run these programs. Better integrating it with the social media and stuff. And we're, you know, the next few months, a lot will happen.
So Okay, so I think I'm hearing an answer here in that. Let me turn this around a little bit. In a few moments, we'll need to start talking about when these events might occur.
Right.
If we want to promote it through Cooler Concord, there's a dependency that Cooler Concord would need to be ready for it in time to promote the events we might have.
I mean, it's already kind of ready. So there's so one thing I should mention, and I've never thought of this as an entirely CSEC thing. I've always thought to have a group of people, some of them whom are working on promotion, and others are working on content. And the promotion people go to meetings and they're always on social media and doing stuff and trying to build the community that way. I've always figured getting ideally some other volunteers, maybe a couple of students to help with that. Whereas CSEC is probably very good at getting the content together, and but there's different ways of doing that. So far, it's been a failure because I haven't come up with this team, and so the site has sort of sat there and has been a kind of a test site for a while. But most of the functionality is there, if not perfect.
Okay, so that's a good introduction. Why don't we pause that piece of it and come back to it in a little bit? Because what I'd like to do is to talk about where we are with the events we've discussed, and with what the status is of the various ones that several of you have signed up to champion. So I'll just kind of go around the metaphorical table here. I'll start with you, Brad, since I'm looking at you right now. But that works. I didn't see. Why don't you give us a brief description of your interactions with the school and what has happened or not happened to date? And your thinking.
Not much has happened. I would describe, so Sharon and I talked about it and we got some ideas out on paper. And I called it a sustainathon, but it's for lack of a better name. But the idea is, let's say, I'm not sure we can pull it off, but one option is try to have an event late in the spring that involves a bunch of students and parents, and ideally engaging, reaching parents through students, and by students I mean the green teams, the Rivers and Revolution, the AP Environmental Science class. There's also sustainability in the 9th grade curriculum that I was hoping to talk to. I had set up a meeting with the assistant superintendent for this week, and then I spaced and put it in the calendar at the wrong time. And they're so busy that we're going to meet next week instead. She's very encouraging about this. She doesn't know exactly what this is, and neither do we. But the way I'm thinking about it is maybe we shouldn't try to bite off more than we could chew, but we should try to do it in a way that this is repeatable yearly. Like establish relationships with some teachers, the people who run some of the green teams. And even if it's not as big as we might, if we can do that in a way that, hey, this was fun, good learning experience, we feel like we did something, we could get in a pattern where our committee interacts with the schools more on a yearly basis. And that's continuity is kind of, would be kind of nice. I will say that I was hoping to get interest from a couple of the Mothers Out Front people, because they're all about engaging families and students and stuff, but I have not gotten a bite, I'm afraid to say. They are.
I might have a reference or contact for you there, which I can provide. My neighbor, Melanie Koo, is very involved with mothers.
Yeah.
And she might be interested in something like that. So why don't we talk about that offline?
We can keep working on that because I think that's a great group and everybody's busy. I just think it needs to be a collaborative effort. And if it was just a couple of us on CSEC, it would be a lot of work and I don't think it would be as successful.
Well,
Sharon, did you have anything to add that I missed or?
The only thing I thought of was, I mean, there is that Cooler Concord Facebook page, and there's then, and the Cooler Concord website really isn't sort of mentioned in that very much at all, and so that would be a good way of promoting it. But that's back to the Cooler Concord page rather than the actual the sustainability series.
Yeah.
Regarding the schools, maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought Glenda Gusson, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
Gilda.
I thought she said that, yeah, just, you gotta give me something to publicize and we'll do it, but
Right.
It's too early.
Right. Well, I want, publicizing is fine,
Yeah, you were hoping for
but
more.
I want help organizing and meeting with teachers.
Yeah.
Stuff. I did a project with the schools 2 years ago. Maybe it was 3 years ago now. It was the 8th grade science classes. And it was one of the most fun things I've done as part of this committee. And we made interior storm windows with the 8th grade science students. And there were a couple of people that helped with that. Mark Hansen, who maybe some of you know, because he kind of designed it. And it was a lot of work. I think I went to, I spent a couple of days at the school and, went down to Home Depot to get materials and we made the stuff. But so it's not just promotion. We need to, make a plan. We can't do everything.
Yeah.
I think it's fun to do a lot of work if you feel like you're accomplishing something, especially because working with the schools can be so rewarding.
You could do that same project again. I mean, you have different 8th grade students.
Yeah.
Right.
So I just a little feedback on your comments, Brad. That all sounds good to me. I agree with you. I think pretty much across the board, it would be not just better, it might be necessary for success to get another group involved with this. I also like the idea of looking at this not just as a one-off thing, but setting it up to be repeatable or continued. For example, the way I'm thinking about what we're trying to do, not individually, but as a group, as a committee, is I'm thinking of these events of calling this a sustainability series. and trying to, sort of brand it that way, that this is more than just, well, here's one event we're doing this year, or here's an event we're doing this year, but it's part of a handful of events that we might do year after year. These topics, they're not going away. They're going to be with us for a while. We're going to need to be in this for the long term. If we do this right, then I think it would be somewhat easier to follow it up next year with another set of events. We're not compelled to do that, but at any rate, that's the way I'm thinking about this. And I think that's in line with what you're looking at, contemplating about doing with the schools.
Yeah. I think we got,
I think I liked the Sustainathon name, Brad, and you may have just been thinking about that for the school, but that really matches the description you just gave, Jerry. This is a long thing that we want to continue. There's going to be mile markers that are these events, and I had talked to Jerry a little bit about trying to encourage people to come to them, and like that kind of punch card idea that if you come to 5 events, could we come up with some motivator, or maybe it's 10, and you could imagine, or I'm imagining, the card is a path or a racetrack, or the marathon route, and maybe there's some thematic things with that we could do branding wise to try to pull all of these together.
I think that could be particularly useful with the students, because if we could get them motivated to go to multiple events, their parents are going to have to take them or at least be involved to some extent. And so we would be getting through to the parents that way, not just through a single event, but through some of these other events too. Okay. Why don't we shift gears, and Doug, you want to give us an update? I know you spoke with someone at the library.
Well, okay, let me just explain the concept of what I've had in mind. I talked to Rennie at the library. She's the person that was responsible for the programming during the week in September this fall. And I met with her at the library, and I think conceptually what I have in mind is to try and take the PowerPoint presentation that I developed from the poster that we created 2 years ago, the Home of the Future, the Sustainable Home of the Future Now, and use it in a meeting, in a webinar setting that would happen around in the Earth Day week that we had talked about. I asked her about whether that was something that she would entertain. And I don't think she's really programmed on a wavelength of working with us per se, but she was more than willing to be open about the idea of putting it into their agenda, as something that could be given or done at the library, maybe which would include the poster and handouts, plus a discussion that would be both, it wouldn't just be one way, it would be more like a community discussion of the people that went to it about those topics that are on the poster.
So,
and I think one of my takeaways from her was, how do I come across as being more serious so she could take it more seriously. And the other thing I have to say is that I haven't given the presentation, although I found the presentation in our archives, and it's okay. It's not great, but I see it as more as an opportunity to stimulate conversation. And maybe it could be done by one or two of us, not just all by one person alone, but in a dialogue fashion. I know that some years ago, I gave a rendition of this to people at Newbury Court, and Brad, you helped me with that. And whether or not it had a great deal of impact wasn't so much the issue, was the exercise of doing it and just trying to engage a group of people with that information. We didn't get much beyond that in terms of ever being able to do other webinars with it because COVID happened and we kind of shut down any live engagements that spring. So I think I'd like to pursue that line. That I am sort of motivated about that, but I would like a partner, somebody to do it with me.
I'll help you with that.
Okay.
I mean, I'm interested in this too. The way back when Brad and Julie and I were talking about making a presentation or preparing a presentation along the lines of your sustainable home now. But I think it kind of died a COVID death. I think that COVID.
Well, here's what I might suggest. Maybe we print out the current draft version of the program, the PowerPoint, get together, meet with Rennie, and see. So you can have a chance to meet with her too and get to know her a little better and talk it over.
So, yeah, I was actually thinking of something similar in that, I haven't met her in person. I've met her on the phone, but that it would be useful to talk to her in some more detail. So yeah, why don't we set that up?
I was left feeling a little bit like after I talked to her, I was thinking to myself, okay, so what's next? And the next thing that I could think of that was next was something that wouldn't happen until next spring when a seminar was scheduled to happen. And I have to practice, delivering it with whoever's going to be a part of it together. So it's a little tighter.
So
Go ahead, Brad.
Time goes on and that material is a little bit stale, or can be. So as part of Heat Smart Alliance, we've developed presentations on particular parts of this that we've given any number of times over the last year, and as a virtual setting. And it's a lot about trying to connect people to coaches, because that's what's, I think, well, you got to get people over the barrier of just absorbing information and deciding to do stuff. I wouldn't be constrained by that presentation, is
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
So
Jerry, I don't know if you can see people's hands raised, but Mike's had his raised for a while, so I just wanted to flag that.
I just noticed that. So Michael, why don't you go ahead? Sorry for the delay.
That's okay. And it's probably too late to chime in on the particular topic of kids in school and getting them motivated so that the parents can essentially follow them. But you know what I got thinking about was Reasons to Be Cheerful has a little punch card. And that's what I thought about with the marathon route and having milestones along the route. Would it be possible to, if this is something that is of interest and ends up getting some sort of traction, to get one of the local bakeries involved, or Reasons to Be Cheerful. And then you could stamp, you could give the kids a little ticket that said, hey, you came to the sustainability event, and then they can bring it back to Concord Tea Cakes or Neshoba Bakery or Reasons to Be Cheerful, and, get a free ice cream or something.
So I imagine we would need to have a budget for that to Well, maybe not. Maybe some of these
They
places.
donate.
I was thinking like if the business community is interested in
Yeah.
being a stakeholder in the entire process is more what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Than, I mean, I don't know how many kids, if you had 300 kids that came to these, then we could put reasons to be cheerful out of business in one night, but I don't think you're going to get that many children there.
Right.
So
Well-
just a thought.
When we tackle the promotion topic, that is certainly an idea that we should add to the mix. And it's related, as you pointed out, it's related to what, Amanda was talking about. And certainly we'll be better off if we can find some ways to motivate people to attend and not just rely upon basic interest or fear of climate change.
I'm thinking, if you're going to involve businesses and you don't want to overwhelm them, you could say the first 10 to have shown they've done this will get ice cream or whatever.
Mhm.
And I don't know whether that, and rather than having 300 kids show up, that could.
So
Right.
Doug, anything else you want to add before we move on to the next topic?
No, you can go on.
I might
Okay.
have one more thing to add to the library conversation. I met with some of the folks that helped put together their sustainability plan. And that might be another angle to go to, Doug, is take a look at their plans and their action items and try to link what we're doing to the action items that are on that list. And maybe even think creatively about like what an event could be. I think you were interested, and I think the library is interested in finding a place where some of the materials that we've created could live. Maybe a children's book on climate action could be put out at different times. And maybe that could be branded as an event on your own time, or, if kind of like an event for someone that's introverted, go to the library and read about the things that you can do on climate change. And we could have a punch card there, it still could fit into the broader framework of things, but kind of provides people that flexibility. And they have, some of their actions are related to programming. And so maybe thinking through that. And I believe the new portion of the library would be open if they got their book racks in or their shelves. So the opening of that is in the near future, and I think it'll be a large event. Is there a way to have a mini event in their large event? Could we have a table? Could we have something else there as a partnership?
One of the things that I had been thinking of, although I haven't made any progress on it to speak of, but I think conceptually it's a cool idea, is the idea of there being a physical presence in the library of, maybe a corner where town statistics about sustainability and the metrics that you want that people can get off the sustainability website can be maintained, so that there's a physical analog of the web, virtualized information. So it becomes a center in the town for where people think about that topic, in this case, sustainability. But a lot of people at the library have to buy into that idea if it's going to happen. And I didn't know how to make that happen particularly.
Well, why don't we start with, as we mentioned a moment ago, you and I meeting with Rennie,
Okay.
you for the second time, me for the first time, do that together, and then perhaps brainstorm with her or come to her with some concrete ideas that we're interested in and see how she reacts to it. But I see the library as a very important partner for us. And I'd like to find ways, plural, that we could engage with them. And, just in this conversation, last few minutes, several ideas just popped up. So I think we first just need to establish a strong communications channel with them. And the next step there would be you and I can meet with Rennie. So let's
Sounds
coordinate
good.
that offline.
Okay, yep.
I have a question. I was wondering if you could just help me walk through the sustainable home concept. So I love the idea of getting folks to see what's available at their home, what they could do at their home. And I suspect this would be anything from heat pumps to high efficiency boilers to solar to LEDs, insulation, whatever it might be. And then my question is, what happens after that? Is there any direction or guidance toward programs that could help them finance that or help them get past that? Hey, this is great. I would love to do this, but I got to renovate my downstairs bathroom first. Or, I've got to put a new roof on my house. Well, that's not a good example, because if you're going to do that, then you might as well put solar in too. But you get the idea. I think I'm in that category where I would love to do a lot of things, and I understand what's out there, and I'm a Concord resident. So what's my next step if there is one?
So let me just give you a very quick rundown, and then I want to move on because time is beginning to run short here for tonight. But basically, CMLP with CSEC's assistance produced a brochure, a very attractive brochure called Your Sustainable Home of the Future Now. And the idea was it highlighted actions or opportunities for actions in different parts of your home, in your basement, in your roof, in your kitchen, in your bathrooms, in your garage. Because of the timing of COVID, I don't think we ever leveraged that terribly well. And so, Doug's idea here is to not revitalize, but take advantage of all this work we've done and get that message out. Now, I think one thing that may be missing from that brochure that you're bringing up here is, okay, yeah, I'd like to do something in my bathroom, in my kitchen. What are the next steps?
Right.
The brochure, I don't think, is terribly strong in that area. But that's a place where if we give a program at the library, we could add that material in and say, we've just shown you folks, you attendees, what are the different possibilities around your house and in your yard of things you can do to be more sustainable. Here are the next steps that you can take, and here are ways to get started.
So this is another place where the shelf life of that brochure is.
Right.
There's other things that are happening. And we talked about that at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, where this company Abode is now proposing to do decarbonization assessments for homes, and to replace the energy audits that we do. And those are going to be cases where there's opportunities for people to come and help you do stuff. So that's why I think focusing on the brochure rather than focusing on this new reality that we might be able to take heavy advantage of in the spring to help promote that.
I think, Brad, you're talking about a new version of the brochure, right? I mean, it needs to be updated with new programs and new things, right?
The brochure is a piece of paper.
Yeah, I don't.
But I thought this is the opportunity for Cooler Concord to be that link between here's your sustainable home, here are the actions you can take, and there are small actions and bigger actions, and here are the programs that can support you, right? That's where I thought the link could be.
I don't see any of this as mutually exclusive.
Right.
I think
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
I think we need multiple paths to people, and once we've got someone engaged, there are multiple paths they can take. But we need to get the word out. And so the program that Doug is describing that I'm interested in too, is not so much focused on that brochure, but it's using the brochure as a vehicle to bring up what are the steps that you can do. And if one of those steps, for example, is engaging with the board, all the better.
Right.
So two things on the library in this event. One being the other sort of entity with so we've got the town, and then there's like the library corporation and the trustees. And so when you're thinking about partners at the library, also think about those other entities that were also heavily involved in the sustainability plan for the library. And there might be extra volunteer support in those groups because they're also passionate about this. So I just wanted to bring that up. And then also at the event, it could be really nice to have our heat pump coaches, our EV coach, if a board comes on and does more coaching, have them there so people can kind of do that one-on-one micro like questions of this is how my home is, and have some of that maybe informal time where they could set up appointments right then and there or something like that. That's an action oriented outcome, I think would be a nice component.
I mean, like setting up coaching opportunities and signing somebody up to do it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Make it easy for them to sign up such that, I mean, just imagining this in a very concrete way, were we to do this in person at the library, as you're saying, Amanda, we could have some of the bold folks there, some of the coaches there, have them, make them available to talk right then and there, and also have them be able, have the attendees be able to sign up for, you know, an audit right then and there.
Yeah.
It does, I guess I come from a very practical perspective. So you get a flow of traffic into an event, you have some coaches that are coaching you on heat pumps. Everybody's excited about heat pumps, and they should be. And then the next step is comparing a more efficient boiler to the cost of a heat pump. Is there, you know, very simply, is there financing in Concord that is available to help with that?
Not now, and that's a missing piece.
There is a rebate you can get from heat pumps, but that's not a financing tool.
Right.
So I'd like to move on now.
I have one last question, just really quickly for Amanda, just a clarification. Can I ask it?
Yes, go ahead. Let's make it quick.
I was of the impression that maybe that the library had internally their own steering committee for the sustainable work that they're going to do. Do you know if that is the case? And maybe one of us could get or participate in that steering committee.
Yeah, they haven't convened yet, but they are planning on it. And Kate Hanley was involved in the development of their plan. And I had said to them that I'd be happy to sit in on their sustainability committee meeting, similar to the school's newly reinvigorated committee. So I can
Maybe
try to help kind of.
Well, maybe we could start off by Jerry and I being a visitor to that meeting or something like that. I don't know. We have to make better contact to figure it out.
I think basically you and I, Doug, need to get over to the library and start talking to folks. And, you know,
Don't forget that there are 2 libraries in this town. Make sure you remember this.
You're referring to Fowler?
There's the one that's in West Concord and there's the one that's in regular Concord.
Okay. I'm using the library to mean the whole thing, the whole system.
Yeah.
All right,
We won't forget that.
let's move on. Janet, can you give us an update on what you've done regarding a keynote address?
I spoke to Carrie, well, I emailed Carrie Emanuel, who, I know personally. Carrie is, he's an MIT climate scientist. And I asked him whether he would be interested in giving a sort of keynote speaker event or whatever. And he said, sure, so long as it's remote. He's in the process of retiring, and they're moving to their house in Maine. So coming down to Boston would not be too convenient. I think we'd need to give him some direction as to what, what we need, what we'd like him to emphasize. I mean, you don't want him to talk about his research on hurricanes particularly, I don't think, but he certainly has opinions of what needs to be done about climate. And I mean, I know, he says things like, we really need to have nuclear as well as renewables, which is a controversial thing. But I don't, we need to get him to focus on our goals.
Right.
Why it's important to act, I think. But we can do that nearer the time, I think. So when we know what exactly this whole series of events is going to be covering, we can address it then.
Well, I think actually we should begin to address it now, because spring will be here before we know it. And I don't mean that in a general sense. I mean that in the sense of we'll need to figure out promotion, and there'll be lead times on promotional activities. And as we back that up, that means we have to figure out what the events are, where those events will be held, when we think we would want to have them, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm thinking here is, could you take a first cut at maybe an abstract, Janet, that you think would be appropriate for our situation? And I'm sure he could cover a number of different related topics.
Oh, I'm sure he could. So would you like to give me some thoughts as to what should be in the abstract?
Well, maybe, how he sees climate change affecting Concord. Or maybe not necessarily Concord specifically, if that's too narrow of a focus for him, but maybe, central Massachusetts, areas in the Northeast that are not directly on the shore, or something like that. I'm sure there's plenty of other ideas. That's just, something that jumps to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, anyone else have any thoughts about what they'd like to hear him talk about, or what might be particularly pertinent for us in Concord?
Well, I guess I certainly like to be focused on climate solutions with something that's and Kerry might not be the best. He might be a good speaker on it, but something that's paints a picture of the transformation that we want to go through. We're kind of just getting started with this transformation, and and for most people, it's pretty difficult to see that this is possible.
So by transformation, you mean
like now, this is the way we live our lives now. But we don't have to be, something a little bit visionary about what could happen over the next 25 years. I guess this is a different direction. I'm sorry if I potentially, but it's, I think that's one of the problems that a lot of people have is just like, we got what we got. I don't know that, I don't really see a way that this changes.
Well, yeah, I've been doing, this reminds me, I think a lot of us, we see what's in front of us. We have a short lifespan. We've all, fossil fuels were abundant and cheap and free and ubiquitous, all of our lifetime. Wasn't that many generations ago, that wasn't true. But we can't see that from our perspective of our one lifetime. And so we think of change as slow, and it isn't necessarily slow. And seeing some of how rapidly was the transformation from there were no cars to everybody had a car. It was very quick. And so there have been very fast transformations in history. So it is possible, I think, and I think it can be really depressing thinking about where we are and where we need to go, but it can also be a little heartening to see how quickly some of these transformations have occurred in the past, and it can happen quickly.
Yeah,
That's a good point. Yeah.
I like the part about Brad that you said, visionary. I mean, that encompasses a lot of what Sharon just talked about too. Janet, do you have some raw material there to?
Yeah, I've scribbled some thoughts down, and I will think some more. And if anybody has thoughts after the meeting, please send me an email or give me a phone call.
Exactly.
I
Okay.
mean, I personally think, I mean, I already told Janet this, that Carrie Emanuel is super inspiring about science of this whole thing. I just wasn't, if you ask him whether he can do something that's optimistic, that whether he's the right guy for that talk, I don't know.
Well, the expression perfect is the enemy of good.
Yeah,
I don't know that we need to have a perfect speaker.
right. That's good.
Maybe given his I just was reading more about him, given his background in modeling, I guess when I've done a lot of outreach, a lot of the data is available statewide or by the county, and that's really okay because our climate is also regional. Our climate isn't specific to one town. And I wonder if he could sort of speak to some of that in layman's terms of this is a global phenomenon, but there are regional trends that are still really important, even if it doesn't specifically say Concord changed 2 degrees, even if it says Massachusetts, that's still a big deal to us. And it still really means something to us, even if it doesn't say 55 Church Street, West Concord on it. Like the specificity of the model at a regional level is still really important. And maybe that could kind of help dispel one of those typical myths. I don't know if others have experienced that. But.
It reminds me of a saying we had in the 90s, think globally, act locally.
Exactly. Me too.
Revive that.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be a vision, of what would happen if we do nothing, and a vision of something that we could, if everybody acts and does things in the right direction, how much better it would be.
Yeah, and I'm sure, it'll be helpful to not just ask him, but to discuss it with him.
Sure,
what he,
absolutely.
give him some of these ideas and see what he can work up with it. But if he's an inspiring speaker, even if it's about science per se, I'm sure that inspiration will come across to the rest of the audience, even if it's on a different topic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I heard him speak in Lexington once. I mean, obviously, I know him personally. I'm not listening to giving a lecture, but I did hear him once. I did hear him speak in Lexington once, so I know he's good.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. If you know, you could go at it from several angles, from extremely practical approaches to climate change to zeroing in on Concord or regionally, but you know, an aspirational speaker can do a lot. So even if it's that, I think it could still go a long way.
Yep. Agreed.
Okay, I will distill these thoughts into something coherent, and we will converse. But,
Excellent.
and of course, you know, he may have some constraints of particular times. So he did say he'd do it if he was available. So we need to decide when.
Yeah.
And
Well, let's move on to Michael and what he's doing with reaching out to the business community, and then hopefully, if we have any time left, we can talk a little bit about timeframes and the such.
okay.
Michael,
Yeah.
want to update folks on what you've done?
Yep. So I sent out an email today. I think I got mostly everything covered on that I've been working on a little bit. And I'll just preamble all of this with, I come to the table with a very practical approach to things. I like to ask those questions. So we've got this far, we've gotten this far, we've gotten this far, we've got someone who's interested in doing something. How can we help them? How can we help them really financially? And unfortunately, I think a lot of it does come down to that. I can say, based on my experience trying to motivate a commercial and industrial client base in National Grid, it really does come down to financing. So with that in mind, and Jerry, the context of the discussion that we had about somehow reaching out to the business community and having some sort of exchange with them, listening to what they are thinking, what they need, what they are curious about, and maybe filling in some of those holes with what we can offer, not necessarily at CSEC, but point them in the right direction and help them. So with that in mind, I thought about the Green Communities, which is a very popular program in Massachusetts. And I'm sure everybody on the call right now can probably fill me in on where Concord stands on Green Communities. But I didn't see any projects, or maybe they just haven't been listed on the website yet since 2018. So I'm just wondering, is there, we don't have to answer it now, but that's again, that's a funding source. Depending on how active you are with the Green Communities, you can get anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000
Right.
A year.
So there have been Green Communities grants done in the last couple of years through Pamela Cady at the Light Plant has been, well, I think Kate Hanley was involved in that as well. Some combination of them proposing different things.
Yeah.
I don't know what they did most recently.
In my understanding, there was kind of a facility CMLP sustainability meeting that would come together and run through a list of projects based on the municipal energy data. In my understanding, the Green Communities program funds municipal projects, and so if we were focused on the commercial side of things, I don't think they will be eligible. I'm actually speaking to the coordinator tomorrow from Green Communities just to kind of see where they see the program headed in the future, especially with the infrastructure bill and ARPA funding, and see if I can kind of get a sense of if priorities will be changing in the future. And I can certainly ask about this topic area. I know that the current application that's in is for the Ripley School and Administration building, and that previous projects had been done at the BD Center. But I don't kind of know the order of when things were implemented, but I know that we do have an application in right now. I know that Pamela also sent in our annual report for green communities this week. It's due tomorrow, but I think she probably sent it in today.
All right, well, that's great. I didn't see it on the DOER's website, which is why I brought it up. But you're right, this is only for municipal buildings or entities. It's not for private. Okay, so it sounds like CMLP is really more I'm just thinking what we're doing with schools and libraries. Is there any coordination between CMLP and what we might be doing with our schools and libraries?
So I know that there hasn't been a ton of outreach done on the PACE program, which was something that was passed by the select board in late 2020. And so that's something that we could create outreach materials on. I know that CMLP is working on a rebate for EV chargers for commercial buildings and multi-unit family, like apartment buildings. But they haven't rolled that out yet, but it's in the pipeline. And that would pair well with mass EVEP grants for EV infrastructure installation. Other than that, I'm not aware of any programs, but I think an UNH fellow did some assessment on what we could do with commercial property. So let me dig that up, Mike, and send that to you. And maybe there are some nuggets in there we could pull from.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, ultimately it's not a lot of money every year, and 100,000 gets spent pretty quickly. But if we're doing something with municipal buildings, perhaps there could be some coordination there with CMLP. The GAP 3 grant, I was in a meeting earlier this week with 40 or so municipalities in Massachusetts with the DEP and Department of Energy. And there was an update on the GAP 3 grant, and I sent that out. It looks like there's a little bit more time with that. It looks like the window for applications is probably not going to be opening until late fall or early December. So that's great that you reached out to the DPW and water and wastewater facilities. I know the DEP is really eager to fund some of these, and the earlier an application goes in, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to guess that the more visibility it may get. So that's another source of funding. The other thing I came across during the same meeting was there was someone there who does a lot of work with green communities. I think she's a consultant for a lot of the towns, and she's got some sort of a green communities moniker. I'm not sure what it is, or maybe she gets somehow she's got, I'm not sure what the relationship is, honestly, with her and green communities and or the municipalities. But she mentioned that for municipal light districts such as Concord and others, there actually is a way to access electrical data, which is just phenomenal if that is true. I went onto the site, and it does need some sort of signature, application and signature from someone in a community, selectman or board member, or whatever it might be, if it's a municipality, or if it's a town such as Concord. I'm not sure what that is, but it does sound like if you participate in green communities and there's some interest in looking at electrical data, and if you don't fall under the investor-owned utility umbrella, which Concord does not, there is a way to access energy data. So I found that very encouraging.
Mike, what kind of electricity data are you trying to access? Because we do have all the total, we know how many kilowatt hours are used in different sectors and stuff like that. Is it more granular than that you're trying to access?
Oh, okay. So I didn't realize that, but ultimately it would be some granularity, either toward sector or really toward address.
So I think
That's
I think it's the Mass Energy Insight, and I'm in the process of getting access to that, Mike. I have to go through the process you just outlined, get a letter, get it signed, and that sort of thing. Pamela uses all of that data to develop our Green Communities annual report, and so it is, has been in use in the town's domain before. Helps, I think, to my understanding, inform those Green Communities applications. So I think it is a great resource, and when I have access to it, I'll have a little bit more information of what is actually in there. But if we're interested in that, I can get some more information from Pamela as well.
So,
Yeah.
So Michael, I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna wrap this piece of the conversation up because we're well behind on time. But I'll follow up with you offline. I saw your emails earlier today. It looks like you've got a couple of good contacts at the Chamber of Commerce and Concord Business Partnership. So I think probably the next step is to reach out to them. But in any event, I'll be back in touch with you and we can plot next steps. Okay. I'd hope to talk more about potential schedules and when we might see things rolling out, but our discussion has been sufficiently lively. Well, no, I shouldn't put it that way. It has been, but I haven't done a particularly good job of managing time. So in the time remaining, Amanda, I had you on the agenda for talking a little bit about the effective governance workshop and implications for us. Can you give us a quick rundown, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that if you didn't make it to the workshop last Saturday, they did record it. I thought it was really helpful. I think there were three main takeaways for me. One being that in addition to this workshop being published online to watch, there's also other resources on there if people have questions or need a refresher. To me, this is one of those things that it's so detailed that kind of reviewing it in the same way that some companies have safety meetings every once in a while, having a safety moment or an open meeting law moment at our meetings might be kind of nice to do. And so with that in mind, the other takeaways from that meeting is just making sure that no deliberation is happening over email. And one of the ways that I thought was a nice tip was putting, if you're emailing something out to the full committee, putting everyone in the BCC line so that if they accidentally hit reply all, you're not accidentally deliberating via email. So I thought that was a really great tip. And the other thing that came up was the differentiation from a subquorum, a subcommittee, and then just a champion and a few volunteers working on something outside of session. Jerry and I met with Kari, the town clerk, outside of that to try to get some clarification on that. there were some nuances. So Kari is going to reach out to the state office to get some more information on it. But the gist of it is, if the committee delegates and sort of appoints 2 people to work on something, it would be formulating a subcommittee, which would then need to adhere to open meeting law. And the nuance that we are asking about is sort of in the case that we have for the events, if there's a champion for an event and someone volunteers to help with that, is that sanctioned by the committee? But I can see already organically something that I think is really important happening is, even if there's a champion on CSEC, thinking through if we need support, that it doesn't necessarily have to be from a member on CSEC, which is already happening organically. So thinking through that as well as an option, because that would definitely not form a subcommittee, right? Like if you had a volunteer helping you that wasn't on CSEC, and that also sort of spreads our network and brings people into our committee without being formally on the committee. So more information to come on that when we hear back from Kari on some of the nuances of that, but just wanted to remind folks of those resources and some of the trickiness surrounding that and the value around transparency.
I have a question about transparency because, we should very regularly say, do not copy all to emails. Because that does happen. But I think transparency of knowing who emails go to is important. So putting people in BCC, I think is not, in my mind, a good way to do that. When we're talking to the committee, we're talking to the committee in an open way. And I think a good practice is to, by the way, put right in your email, don't copy all to this, just in case you were thinking of it. That's just my opinion. Matt may have another opinion.
Yeah, I was just going to say that on the select board, we have something, and I don't know how they managed to set it up, but sometimes we get stuff sent to an email group address called select board. And if I try to hit reply to that, it tells me you are not authorized to send to this group. And, which is great because I can see that it went to the select board, and yet it warns me, now I can still expand the list to individuals and then edit and send to somebody, but I'm doing that in a very conscious way when I do. So I wonder if maybe that just the way that somebody set up the select board group email address, that someone could set up that similar kind of thing for CSEC with the similar kind of controls.
That's set up on the Exchange server that the town has, right? So that has to be done by the Exchange server administrator.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it must not take more than 5 minutes if they've got the info. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that is a real good benefit because it keeps a public record of the flow of emails.
Yeah. No, I think it addresses your concern, Brad. Yeah.
But I think the issue is we're all, unlike you, Matt, with a Concord MA email address. Our email addresses are all private, individual. So we don't go through the server.
I see. Yeah.
That would require that we have an email address in Concord, Mass. ConcordMA.gov.
So I think we're still back to, at least in this regard, just being individually careful when we email information around amongst the group.
Fair enough.
I think to summarize 2 things from Amanda's report and from my participation, I think everyone is aware, or at least they should be aware, that we cannot meet and discuss business outside of a meeting if we have a quorum. If there's no quorum, we cannot deliberate. The second thing, which is going to be up to me, I think, is to avoid establishing, implicitly or explicitly, avoid establishing subcommittees. So,
Unless there are times when they might be.
of course, but I should say inadvertently establishing a subcommittee. Now, this is part of what we've asked Kari to confirm, or some aspects of that. So I guess for the committee, for the members of the committee, don't worry about this stuff to any extent. Just remember, don't accidentally form a quorum and start talking about business. I don't think that's likely to happen. But I think that's the main takeaway for me from this.
What's considered a quorum?
5 CSEC members.
5? Okay.
Right. That's why I commented, I don't think this is likely to happen
But
inadvertently.
it can also happen serially. So in other words, if 3 of you are chatting and then somebody forwards it to 2 other folk, then all of a sudden you're in a quorum.
Yeah.
But isn't it simpler to say no decision unless the committee meets at a regular schedule?
Yeah, but even deliberation is the thing, discussion of the
Oh.
issues among a quorum of the group, serially or together. That's the constraint.
Okay.
And a subcommittee does not have to be a subquorum. So that's where it also gets tricky. But we'll have more details from Kari on that soon. And she also offered to come speak with us and answer questions. And so that's a greater interest. We can do that.
Right. I mean, hopefully we don't have to spend too much time on this topic going forward, because it takes away from the time we had to spend on the meat of our business.
Yeah.
To that end, next agenda item is liaison reports. Janet, do you have anything to report on the EV working group?
Hope you're on mute, Janet.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Not that I muted myself. They did a survey on your, what your next vehicle is going to be. They had 606 respondents. 476 of those did not already have an EV. And 61% of those did say that for the next car, they would like to get a new or used electric vehicle plug-in. And most wanted a crossover or an SUV, or the next category was a hatchback. So they're not looking for Teslas, I don't think. And that what they also found out was people really don't know about the rebates that are available from the state and from Concord, for both purchasing and for charging. So this all needs to be publicized a lot more.
Yeah.
I
Billboard.
think that's a great recap, and again, nice sort of example of how do we convey whether it be EVs or whatever, how do we convey what's available, financially to help get them over that hump. And I'll tell you one thing that's interesting about EVs, and because I'm shopping for one right now, there's a $7,500 federal incentive. But if you don't owe $7,500 or more on your taxes next year, you don't get it all. So if you owe $3,000 in taxes, that's all you get of your $7,500. So that was an eye opener to me.
But the state rebate is actually a check you get in the mail. So
Yes,
because that's 500. So that seems far more equitable to me.
And there's a relatively easy way for most of us to create a $7,500 tax burden, if you wouldn't otherwise have one, is convert some of your IRA or 401k to a Roth.
Perfect.
And
How does CSEC tell the people of Concord that? There you go. Perfect example.
Yeah.
I know, a forum on electric vehicle
Financing.
financing, yes.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's about the. Amanda already spoke about the commercial EV charging station stuff, so I'm not going to talk about that.
Okay,
So I'm done.
thank you, Janet. Doug, were you able to attend the CAB meeting?
What I found out was the CAB meeting was canceled for November 17th. And there was one on the 3rd, but I will still be planning to go to the next meeting in December, but there wasn't, they deferred it. I was kind of wondering in my own mind why they canceled it, but I think they're having challenges trying to figure out their agendas as well.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is to discuss subsequent meeting times. For the last several months, I've been sending out doodle polls. And what I'm for each meeting, and I'd like to get away from that if possible. Let me cut to the chase, and that is, I'd like to suggest that we establish this meeting time as the standard, namely third Thursday of the month, 7 to 9 p.m. Does anyone have any comments on that, concerns, alternative proposals? Okay. All right, that's clear. Sharon and Doug, I hear you. Anyone else?
I think it's a great, it's a good idea. That way we could get it on our calendars for the next 6 months and it just sits there.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So Amanda, I don't see Amanda anymore.
Yeah,
Oh, there
she's-
you go. Okay.
Okay.
Brad, did you want to say something?
I wanted to ask whether any more thought had gone into what Matt brought to the last meeting about committee structures. If is there any thought of rearranging anything?
The Amanda and I talked about this, and the opinions that I gave her, my opinions that I shared with her, are the following. Number one, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other whether we keep the committees separate or together. However, I did note that the charters are rather distinct. And so of the two committees. And so the implication of that is if there's one committee, it has to almost immediately form two subcommittees to work on these different topics. I think the committee otherwise would be either too big to manage flat, or there'd be just so much to do that it would not be effective. Now, along with that, this issue of what does it mean to have a subcommittee or not have a subcommittee? And by not having a subcommittee, meaning, can people work together offline without running afoul of open meeting laws? If, and I'll just use CSEC as an example, if 2 or 3 of us on an ad hoc basis cannot converse or work together on CSEC related material without formally adhering to open meeting laws in terms of advance notice and publication of minutes and stuff like that, then if we can't do that, then I am opposed to merging the committees. And the reason is, I think for such a big committee with such a broad charter, that too much work will have to get done outside of the meetings with people coordinating with each other. So that was my feedback.
Hey, folks, I got to run. I'm sorry. Great meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
I got to be out of here at 9. Sorry.
Okay. So, we have Amanda here, we have Matt here. If any of you wish to offer your opinions, now's a good time. so that Amanda and Matt can hear it. But basically, what I just said is what I had told Amanda directly.
Let me clarify just what I think I am hearing you say, because I tend to agree with you. I'm just imagining that two of us get together and we are outside of the regular meeting and we're trying to formulate a plan for how we're going to proceed on some of these series, activities or events.
So you're not making town policy when you're working on a library event. I mean, this-
I
If-
wouldn't think we would either. I wouldn't think we would be.
All right, so here's the case that complicates it. I kind of stepped in it in our last meeting without knowing it. So in our last meeting, I asked for champions. Several of you raised your hand and said, I'd like to do that. Brad, you said, I'd like to do something with schools.
yeah,
I said, great, champion that. And then Sharon says, oh, I'd like to work with Brad on that. And not knowing any better, I said, sure, go do that. That apparently was a mistake on my part.
I disagree. I don't think
Oh,
that.
hold on. According to Carrie's interpretation of open meeting laws, that formed a subcommittee. Even though I didn't call it a subcommittee, even though that was not the intention, but that in effect forms a subcommittee. And then because it's a subcommittee, now you have to follow open meeting laws. So Amanda, did I get that straight?
I think
So
you-
if the intent was to brainstorm on the event and then come back to the committee to discuss, here is what we think we should be doing, and then the committee votes, what happens?
This
There
is
is
the
no
way-
subcommittee. They just brainstorm on the event, as opposed to taking the 2 hours to think about it. There are 8 people. They brainstorm, they come back to the committee, here is what we think we should do. And the committee discusses and says, yes, let's go and do that.
Don't shoot the
So
messenger.
the distinction, as it's been explained to me, is if the group, the subgroup of people is doing a task at the behest of the committee, then they are forming a subcommittee. If instead people are just getting together ad hoc, and even if they're just, going to create a proposal and bring it to the committee, they are not necessarily a subcommittee. It's really whether it's under the direction of the committee that determines whether it becomes a subcommittee. So
That's
the
an
other
interesting
thing I wanted to
interpretation,
mention is that subcommittee members don't have to be the same as the committee members, right? And so, I think there was a comment made last time that like, wow, it's just going to be too many meetings for people if they have to both attend the subcommittee and the committee meetings. But that wouldn't necessarily have to be the case in a reconstruction of something. Somebody could be, on the subcommittee because that's the area that they're most interested in, and leave it to somebody else to be on the committee. Those that are more deeply engaged can go to both, but they don't have,
But if you're
set it
already,
up so not everybody has to.
but if you're already a committee member and you're working with the subcommittee, that's 2 meetings.
Yeah, yes, and that's the thing is that, and yet not everybody has to do both, is what I was getting at.
But
Yeah,
if
but
you're,
to stay informed-
Some people could just, like I said, just belong to the subcommittee.
I think, I mean, I don't know, we'll see what Carrie has to say, but it seems to me this is like the best way for no one doing anything then.
Well,
Right.
by the way,
Right.
open meeting law.
That's part of what the
agree.
intent of open meeting law
Yeah,
is.
I'm not here to be like the great defender of open meeting law, just trying to help people live with it.
Right.
It can be quite frustrating at times. Yeah.
It seems to me that the open meeting law is to protect the decision and deliberation-making process so that it's open and public. That's really
Yeah,
the
and-
intent, right?
Yeah, that is. And, you can imagine in the case of negotiating, well, let's constructing the middle school, right? $100 million decision. It's vital that that process be transparent.
Exactly. No, I
Yeah,
agree.
and yet, if you're sitting here trying to come up with, the programming for an upcoming event for the town sustainability, it can be quite an annoyance.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that I think the other question is what constitutes a deliberation. So again, if you're just working on putting together the agenda, finding speakers, doing all this stuff for, you know, an event, then that's a great question of whether, is that a subcommittee? Do they have to have, you know, declared meetings and so forth?
Yeah, unless somebody comes and says,
should
how come
really
you
have
put a
Kari.
climate denier on the speaker list, right?
So, you know, it's, I
I mean-
don't, I don't want the committee to spend much time on this. I regret we've already had to put this much time into it. I will try and resolve all this as best I can with Kari. But Matt, you and I may want to talk about this.
Yeah.
Because the initial conversation with Kari was wasn't easy. Let me just put it that way. And I am concerned. But getting back to the question that Brad posed, which is where the jumping off point here was about, you know, how this potential merger is going. I don't have any information. I don't know if Matt or you or Amanda have.
No, I don't have anything. And again,
but I just
hope
wanted
you all, you and Jake and Amanda would chat.
Yeah. But I did make the point explicitly that if the interpretation of open meeting laws is as Kari presented it to me, I am absolutely opposed to merging the committees. So Matt, you may want to make note of that too, in case you're involved with that. All right. We're over time. The last item here is public comment, but I see no one from the public. Are there any other topics anyone wants to bring up, or any comments before we adjourn?
I'm sorry, but I just have two more. One is an upcoming event on this school. They're planning a sustainability panel December 8th at, I believe, 7 o'clock. So if you're interested in that, maybe mark your calendars. And then the other,
What? I didn't hear what that was.
Where, what school?
it's for the middle school building project.
School building.
The communications committee is putting on a sustainability panel. So that's an upcoming event I just wanted folks to know about. And the other upcoming event is also in December. I don't know that they've set a date yet, but the planning board is working on some new language around the Thoreau Depot Business District. And I, you know, anytime there's a change in
December
zoning,
14th.
there's
December
an
14th, I think.
opportunity. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
There's an
I think
opportunity to think about resilience and sustainability. So I thought this group might be interested in knowing that that's happening as well.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda. One more time, any other comments?
I'm tired.
Is that Brad?
I'm tired.
You're all
I
done?
want to
Okay.
congratulate all of us for putting our whole name. I've been on Zoom calls, but you're supposed to do that in a town, and we all did it. And I've been on other calls where they didn't.
Mine always ends up as one word. And
On the back.
Close
Okay.
enough, I think.
Anyone wish to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Doug spoke up first. So Doug made the motion. Brad, I'm assuming you'll second.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Okay, we're done.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Everyone.
Thank you,
All right.
especially
Everybody.